Good morning. My name is Sonya. I'm a mortgage professional with, dare I say it, 3 decades of mortgage experience. What this means for you is that I know about marketing to consumers. I know about lead generation. I know about cold calling. I know about do not call lists and the rules that salespeople must engage in to make sure that they're calling people at the appropriate times and days. I know about follow-up. I know about contact management programs, mixing email with phone calls, and even, again, dare I say it, snail mail, paper mail. So mixing those three medias as well as networking, branding yourself. I also know about building rapport with prospects, doing your homework ahead of time, having a commonality that can then be threaded into the conversation and be a building block for a relationship. From there, I know about putting a loan file together. We still tend to call them files, even though these days they're mostly electronic. I also know about the whole paper versus electronic files and the difficulty in transitioning from that paper file that we've all had and passed around the office and opened and closed and kept comment sheets in and written on and date stamped, and trying to work fully electronically with virtually no paper and strictly a monitor or 2 or 3. I once had an underwriter that actually had 4 monitors, and she was very, very productive. So having no paper versus some paper, and tailoring your work to what works best for you. So not everyone can retain and work with information strictly electronically. It definitely has to be a part of the information that we work with, but not everyone can do that. Some people need to write things. Personally, I find, and I've actually read studies that say that you remember what you hear, you remember a small percentage of. What you speak aloud, you remember a bigger percentage of. And what you write, you remember a much greater percentage of. So simply writing things is a good way to remember them. I'm a big note taker, and in the years of training and meetings and collaboration and events and committee that I were on, events that I planned, I would often take copious notes, often pages of notes. I would come away from a 3-day manager's meeting and have pages of notes, and I would typically refer back to those notes at some point, maybe highlighting key things and transferring them into other communications within the organization. Sometimes I would never look back at the notes. But again, I find that I remember much more simply from the act of writing it down. And I like to work with processors and underwriters and closers and loan officers with the way they run their business. What do they write down? What paper do they print? How do they use it? And finding a way that works for them so that they can be the most productive as well as have the customer's information obviously the most secure. So fast forward then from lead generation, building rapport with the customer, getting the contract, sending in the application, the loan file, into fulfillment or processing or a setup person. From there, I have been intimately engaged with the process of taking the loan in and getting it to the closing table. I have also been intimately involved with TRID and getting the closing disclosure out, not just 3 days, which is the minimum, and what most of I find our industry has figured out how to get it there 3 days early, but 3 days is really the minimum time frame. Really 7 days is what you want, because then you can simply mail it, so to speak, and not have to have the customer do anything. They don't have to go online. I have spoken many times to customers. One particular conversation I recall was the customer, we reached them, it was something like a Friday before a holiday weekend, and in order for them to close on Wednesday, they needed to acknowledge their closing disclosure that night. And it was about 6 o'clock on a Friday night. The processor I saw on the floor, very upset. And so I went to say, what's happening? Is there anything I can do to help? And she had the customer on hold, was trying to reach the loan officer, couldn't, said they were very upset. So I got on the phone with the gentleman, and he explained to me that they were on their way to dinner. He said, I'm on my way to dinner with my wife. It's our anniversary. Do you mean to tell me that I must get online and take care of this evening? And I let him know that in order to disperse the loan on Tuesday, we would need to have the closing disclosure acknowledged by midnight Eastern time tonight, Friday. So I was very sorry to tell him that he would need to do it tonight, or we could date it for Wednesday and he could close on Wednesday, whatever the example was. And of course, that wasn't what he wanted. He ended up acknowledging it in closing, and he actually wrote in his survey that he very much appreciated my honesty. He was frustrated, but he understood and appreciated me explaining it to him. Most of the time I find that customers, when they're upset, they really want to know what's going on. They want to understand. We tell them, I'm sorry to use air quotes, but we tell them the underwriter said this, and the underwriter needs this. And I always tell processors, to me, that's like a cardinal sin. You never say the underwriter needs this, because who needs it? It's not the underwriter. It's not Sally, the underwriter. It's the company. It's the industry. We need the back of page 9, because page 9 says continued on the next page. And we have to make sure that we're looking at all of the information. And it being blank is perfectly fine. And we will put that blank file that says page 10 of 10 into your electronic loan file. Not that the underwriter needs it, not that the underwriter is asking for this, or the underwriter didn't accept this. That's always a good one. The underwriter didn't like your explanation. That's definitely, in my mind, somewhat of a cop-out, because what we need to do is read the explanation when we get it and hopefully talk to the customer first. Tell me about the circumstances surrounding X, this late payment, or this foreclosure, or this repossession. Tell me about the circumstances surrounding X, okay? That will give you an idea of what they would write. So when they tell it to you, I understand, I appreciate that, and if you would put that into writing, we can make it part of your loan file for consideration. So getting the letter and reading it and not wanting to pass judgment on it, or not reading it, when you do get the letter, you also must read it. And if it doesn't say what we talked about that I understood, then I'm going to call the customer back and explain, I received your letter today. However, it mentions the purchasing of a boat. And when I talked to you last week, I didn't recall you saying that. So can you walk me through what the purpose of that cash advance was? Okay, great. Thank you. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. If you would put that into writing and send it to me, I'll make it part of your file. So I think processors often want to be paper pushers, professional paper pushers, and put it to the underwriter and then let the underwriter be the bad guy. The underwriter's the bad woman, man, and says, this letter's not sufficient, this letter doesn't match the file, this letter contradicts something else in the file. And then we tell the customer, the underwriter says that the letter is not good enough. The underwriter says that you need to write a new letter. So I love coaching processors on how to be upfront and candid and professional and honest with the customer, and how to manage their pipeline in such a way that results in regular touches for each customer, and each touch carrying the most possible efficiency. And we'll talk about that more in blog number 2. And I love working with underwriters as well on the way that they underwrite the file. I find that they want to do different things first, which is fine, but there are things that they can do that will streamline the process. There are banner type notes that they can keep and then copy and paste and fill in the blanks. The Word documents that can be used. There's templates that can be built into much of the information. And it looks like I'm getting the hook here, so I'm going to wrap it up. And I hope that you will come and listen to more on part 2. Thanks so much. SSB Consult. Have a great day.